Tangi, you seem to be on the spot, but it is a nice starter for 10, nice easy one. 2 minutes, could you tell us a bit about yourself and what led you to offer yourself in service to our community?
Kia ora ana koutou katoa tō tēnā koutou katoa. Thanks, Kim, and thanks to Te Pū Harakeke and NPR for making this afternoon a possibility. So I think most people in the room would know that this is the place I call home. I was born here just over 40 years ago, or 43, and this is the place that I've continued to call my home. In terms of what has drawn me to public service, I had spent a decade on the Palmerston North City Council, really engaged with the local community here in Palmerston North before entering Parliament 3 years ago. Values are really important to me, so I support and stand alongside and within the New Zealand Labour Party because the values of equity, equal opportunity and fairness is what's really important to me and my family, and so that in turn is important to me and what that means for my local community. I've enjoyed the last 3 years as the local MP. The reality is that Parliament sits at least 30 weeks of a year, and so it means that you don't get to spend as much time as you would like to here. That's because you're in Wellington doing the job advocating for this community, and I'm sure the questions will tease out some of what that has looked like over the last 3 years and what it is that we're focused on. In terms of the New Zealand Labour Party, we are focused on this particular election and delivering support for the very people actually who you will see at the coalface. We're not about tax cuts, we are about ensuring that there is targeted support for whānau and households who are finding it tough right now as we deal with this cost of living pressure and issues, and as we come out of a cyclone recovery as well, the second worst natural disaster that our community, and I say community because we've all had to get in behind, that has faced. So yep, happy to take your questions, but more importantly happy to be here with you this afternoon.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, kia koutou ngā pū Harakeke, kia koutou NPR. I'm fading in and out. Awesome to be here. Sorry about being late. I got stopped trying to get out the door. He must have disappeared really quickly out the door at the last event where everyone had heaps of questions, which is awesome because that's what an election campaign should be about as well. So my name is Teanau Tuiono. I'm the other Cook Island MP that's here in Palmerston North, and proof that actually we're two different people, because actually every now and then I still get some of Tangi's mail, and I think he's still getting some of mine as well. And the downside for Tangi is that he's younger and better looking than me. But I am your Green Party candidate. I'm currently a Member of Parliament as well. I'm passionate about community, passionate about the climate, so people and planet, people before profit, and making sure that we can do all the things that we can do to make sure everybody's got enough to put food on the table, keep the lights on, have a warm whare, and to have those aspirations and those dreams to actually get forward together as whānau and as community. Those things are really, really important for me. I guess I've always been a political person. My mum was involved in trade unions, and so was my father as well. As a young person at Auckland University, I stumbled into an environmental science class, and the lecturer happened to be Jeanette Fitzsimons, who then went on to found the Green Party. So I've always moved in this general direction. We are in the middle of a climate crisis. Our relatives over the hill, over the Ruahenes, know this as well. So we've got to take a really serious climate action. We also know that there's an inequality crisis as well, and actually we can't keep tweaking around the edges. We've actually got to be able to make sure that we've got the resources. So with this election, we've been calling for an income guarantee. We've been calling also for a rental warrant of fitness. We'd be calling for a whole lot of other things as well, but I will get to that in other questions.
Thank you, Tiana. First of all, thank you for the Community Collective inviting me, and I would just like to acknowledge you, the sitting MPs. This is probably the fifth debate along with these two gentlemen here, and thank you to the Manawa 2 People Radio. So we have, pretty happy to be here, and unlike the two of these don't have a political background, so I'm the new kid on the block. But for some of the reason, say why I'm here, so some of the initiative which I have seen, the issues I've seen in the community, those have driven my desire to be an active part of this one. And like as Tangi and Tiano acknowledged, the cost of living crisis, what we have, it is impacting a lot of almost everyone in the community. Another major issues facing we in the health and education space, where the outcomes are where they are not where it should be. and the law and order situation in the city and the wider country. And most importantly, that we need to have other people like our most vulnerable in the housing and the infrastructure space. So these some of the base core issues have driven my passion to be in part of active politics and bring a meaningful change for our community. So those are some of the reasons I am standing to be our next MP here. Thank you.
So Tiana, you get to take the first on this one. What are you most proud of in your party's record in supporting or working with the community sector? So what are you most...
the last 3 years?
Up to you.
General question.
Yep.
Many things that I'm proud of in terms of the work that I've been advocating for. We also pushed to make sure that we could get better services with the Capital Connection, supporting the work that Tangi was doing. So it's good to see some movement happening there as well. Regionally as well, I've got 14 portfolios. That's what happens when you've only got 9 MPs. So party vote for the Greens means I don't have 14 portfolios, but we share them around a bit more. But regionally, I've been proud of the work that we've been doing to start to get a moratorium on deep sea mining as well. So making sure that we looked after the moana, look after the ocean is really important because that's part of our shared Pacific identity. Also pushed for the Dawn Raids apologies that happened under Minister O'Pito. It was really good to see that happen, but we do want to see more things happen to make that apology even more meaningful around an amnesty for overstayers for many of our Pasifika whānau and others, but also trying to find pathways for residencies for migrants as well. There are many things that has happened over the last 3 years, and those are just a couple of them.
I think actually across to Ankit if you could. So yeah, again, what are you most proud of? It doesn't. I'm not talking 3 years. It can be as long as you like. Of the party's record.
Thank you. I think the most proud moment of the policy of the party thinking is like we do not believe in the centralization of everything. We want to have a localized regional approach. And that's why whether it's education, whether it's health, and quite recently, only last week, Chris Bishop, he was here as well. And some of the issues around housing, we had a visit to a few housing organizations and homes for people. And when Nicola Willis, she was here, we went to TT here as well. So that the localized community-based approach, that's what most I'm proud of. So we believe in collaborative partnership-based approach rather than centralizing everything. And then Wellington telling people that.
Hold on to here, not the cable.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So central rather than centralization, we believe, and that's what we're proud of, that we partner and work with a local community organization. Thank you.
I guess I'm most proud of how this community has got on and done the job of supporting everyone here. It's been a really difficult 3 years, and community groups have been supported by funding to get on and engage with communities is something particularly special. Over the last 3 years, for me, a key focus has been on the Capital Connection. Acknowledge what Tiana has said as well, and so being able to get that over the line in this year's budget is a huge achievement for us as a city, but also for those in the district as well and further down because it'll take in the Masterton line and the like. Also really pleased and proud of the achievement in housing for our community. We have seen the largest number of houses that have been built by kāinga order in the last 6 years than we have previously. Actually, prior to 2017, the number of houses in terms of the kāinga order portfolio was 115 less. So basically, that's right, 115 houses that actually disappeared under the former government. Up until the 31st of July this year, under the last 6 years, we have built 120 and we have 555 still in the pipeline over the next 3 years. So as a local MP, I'm really proud of that and also making sure that we continue to keep the asset on to make sure that that's a particular focus. Also really proud of the fact that we've delivered huge increases in terms of those who are on benefit and superannuation increases have been amongst the highest over the last couple of decades as well. So there's a few things, but those are just top of mind for me right now.
Thanks, Tangi. Thank you all. Ankit, you get this one to first. So in your view, what is the top issue for middle and low income earners in Palmerston North and how would you address it?
Cost of living. That's the since my selection as a candidate in March, so I've been out in the community full time, and that's the cost of living is the most important issue for a lot of communities, not just the middle and low income, but for almost everyone. And there are a few things which we have proposed. First of all is the income tax relief, which is long overdue, and that middle income, they don't qualify for any other government assistance. That's why the income tax relief. And the second thing is we talk about the interest rates, because whether it's rent or the mortgages, a lot of their income is going to paying those mortgages back. So we will bring the interest rate and inflation under control, so they have more of their disposable income in their pocket. And on top of that, for those young families, we will give an extra childcare subsidy. So under our new tax plan, so the young family with the 2 children, they might be saving up to $250 per fortnight. So those are some key things we will bring to address those cost of living challenges. That's the top issue.
Cost of living pressures is definitely, I think that's the top of mind thing. Top of mind thing for me as well. And where we would address that was by having an income guarantee, and just acknowledge that we just came back from the university as well. And there was a people's inquiry which Chloe Smallbrook led on our side, working with student unions, and it found that 2/3 of students are experiencing poverty and hardship. 2/3. So and let's remember that Palmerston North is a student town as well. And so with our income guarantee, that would be $385, whether you're falling out of work or whether you're a student, topped up to double that if you're a couple. And the way that we would fund that is with a wealth tax. And a lot of people might be a bit allergic with that. But here's the thing, right? There are 311 of the richest families in New Zealand that have the cumulative wealth of $85 billion. That is more than the cumulative wealth of the poorest 2.5 million people in New Zealand. That is the state of the wealth gap here in New Zealand. And we are the only country which doesn't have a wealth tax or a capital gains tax or a stamp duty or any of those kinds of things which can help to actually make sure that the rich pay their fair share. So that's what needs to happen, to make sure that we can fund all of those things so that everybody can have enough food on the table, keep the lights on, have a warm whare, and have a dream actually. If you take care of all those essentials, the other things are easier to achieve, and that's how we would do it.
Well, I mean, cost of living is clearly what is hurting households at the moment, and that's the consistent message that you'll get from all of us, it seems. But here's the thing. For us, it's about how we alleviate and target the focus. And we're not into tax cuts. The tax cuts that National are proposing are not funded. Even today, we have 3 independent economists that are saying that there's a $2.1 billion hole in that component itself. So what does that mean? It means that if people want tax cuts, then they're going to have to turn to other cuts to core services, public services, in order to achieve that. The other thing is, I'm proud of the fact that we have increased the minimum wage over the last 6 years to more than $7 an hour since we took office. What are people going to benefit from in those low to mid-income households from a tax cut will be about 25 cents an hour. That doesn't even touch the sides of the $7 increase or minimum increase over the last 6 years. But we've been very clear that we're targeting households by ensuring that we remove GST on fresh and frozen fruit and vegetables, by ensuring that we roll out universal free dental care to all New Zealanders, but acknowledging that that comes at a cost, and so we will transition that by rolling it out to those 18 to 23 and then those 24 to 29. That's going to be have a huge impact on households that really do take choices in their own mind at the moment about whether or not they can afford to put food on the table or whether they can get their teeth fixed, extracted, cleaned, whatever it might be. Early childhood subsidies, rolling that out for those who are aged 2 years. Targeted assistance to support households and families that are in this middle and low bracket, but actually the benefits will be for all. So it is about addressing those pressures, but where you target that is really, really important.
Thank you, Tangi. That's a good segue into the next question, actually. So, thinking about social wellbeing and the need in Palmerston North, how do you see the roles of the not-for-profit sector and the government? How does your party intend to ensure financial sustainability for the not-for-profit sector so there is a robust social infrastructure to meet the community's needs?
It's a good question. It's a very important one, because I think what we saw during the pandemic was the real targeted role that our community groups in the not-for-profit sector actually undertake, and did it extremely well in this community. And I'm not ashamed of the fact that we pumped some resource into that as a government. It's what needed to happen, and people needed to just get on to ensure that the community was vaccinated and were protected, and that has put us in a very good stead for where we are at the moment. So I actually think it's about a continuation of the partnership. I know that in terms of central government and the not-for-profit, sometimes we disagree from time to time, but I think the intent on both parts is still there and quite positive. So it is about trying to reduce some of the compliance costs where possible, things like audit fees, and we've made some progress in that particular space, but it's about making sure that the not-for-profit sector are empowered to get on and do the job, because those that volunteer their time and give up their time do it because they have a love for what they want to do, and they have a love for this community. So the role of government, I think, is on ensuring that they're empowered to do that.
Kia ora. I like what Tangi said, and I would support that. And if I could just probably add with two examples, I'm thinking about Jobs for Nature as well, and the importance of that in terms of during the pandemic of finding, really good mahi for people to do, which actually was about looking after the environment, and the importance for that kind of work to continue as well, and also acknowledging the work that many of our Māori communities did, many of our marae did as well, particularly during the pandemic, which is still happening by the way as well. For me, it was like the easiest way for me to connect with health services, because I knew the people, and we were all in the same orbit as well. So two really strong examples of where you can actually make sure that there's support there. But I would say that empowerment is good, but we've also got to make sure that there is more resources made available, which takes me back to what I was originally saying about the wealth tax, or something equivalent to that. With the wealth tax, you bring in enough pūtea, enough budget to make sure that we have that strong, solid foundation to build all the stuff on top of. It's important that we do that. We are the only country in the OECD that doesn't have this at all. And so if we do that, that provides that foundation to do all these good things, which will ultimately benefit our communities here in Palmerston North.
Before I answer this question, I just want to take a step back and address some of the things these two gentlemen mentioned, right? They keep talking about tax, and one thing they forgot to mention that in 2017, the government's tax intake was $67 billion. In 2023, the government tax intake is $117 billion, which is $50 billion more than just 6 years ago, right? And if they still find that there's not enough money in the system, there's something seriously wrong with their financial management.
It's a pandemic. In between in and out.
And I'll tell you, right, there's all that doesn't go to the pandemic. And let me finish this one. Thank you. Tangi talked about taking GST off fresh fruit and veggies. One thing he forgot to mention, that to fulfill that one, they are bringing the fuel tax. And by the way,
Ankit, do you mind answering the question, which is about how your party intends to ensure we have a solid infrastructure in the community sector?
Yes, and that's why our policy on the infrastructure and some backing up some of the non-profitable organizations, we always, like I said, start with, right, we always believe in centralized rather than centralized, localized, and the community collaborative approach. And whether it's housing, infrastructure, we will work with the local communities and in the regional communities here. So we fund those ones, because those communities, and by sitting here in Palmerston North, people know, community organizations know better where to spend that money, whether it's housing or infrastructure, and how and what solution should be provided. So our approach will be collaborative and partnership with the local approaching, just like I mentioned some of the Homes for People or TTE or some of the other local organizations. That will be our approach.
And is there anything in your party's budget around the budget levels for the organisations,
yes,
such as MSD and Health?
And MSD Health and all those, whether it's MSD Core Health Education, all these core services, we have explicitly said, and it is a written document, anyone can go on the internet and find it. We have explicitly said there will be no cuts or anything to any of the core services. What we have said will be saving money from the back-end offices and putting the money into the frontline services, whether it's police, defense, education, MST, you name it.
All right, thank you. Tangi, I'm just going to give you a tiny bit of pushback when you use the word volunteer. We have a lot of volunteers, we have a lot of professionals as well. Sometimes get a little sensitive about that. Might not be the only one in the room. Tiano, I think you're the next for the next question. Oh, this is perfect timing. We did not plan it this way. Climate disruption will make itself increasingly felt in our region, and what we do over the next decade is vital. What policies and strategies do you see that are important around this in 2 minutes?
2 minutes, right, okay. So we released our climate friendlies policy as well, www.greens.org.nz, because I won't get it all out in the next 2 minutes as well. And part of that is about ensuring that there is enough money. There will be a fund of money to support councils to actually start to adapt to climate change, which is so important. So that's around making sure that you can daylight streams, make sure that you can plant out on other sides of the stream as well, because that's really important to help with flood protection. We've also got some stuff that we're doing around, which we announced in our clean power payment policy. Again, check it out online. And that's around using that money within the emissions trading scheme, not for tax cuts, but actually to help households to transition from gas appliances and those sorts of fossil fuel intensive parts of our house, so that people can get access to money for solar panels, better insulation, heat pumps, those kinds of things as well. And that would be done in partnership actually with the EECA and with regional councils. So it'll be a 6,000 startup grant that people can apply for, and then also a 30,000 no interest loan, which would then be administered in partnership with regional councils. More stuff, but I probably max my time out.
Thanks, Tiano. Yanka.
Thank you. Like I said, 2 minutes is a bit short time, but I'll give 4 main policy ideas. In terms of getting a clean green energy, we have a electrify NZ policy, which means we will remove the bottlenecks on the bureaucracy from the clean wind energy, like just we have some on the Henny ranges, and we will. Our aim is to double the amount of clean energy. We will work with farmers to reduce the emissions in that space. We have bring a policy in that space as well. And quite recently, we have brought a policy that our aim is by 2030 in next 7 years, we aim to have 10,000 EV chargers across the country, so we can have actual more electric vehicles can be on the road, and there's no range anxiety whenever you go anywhere, right? And we are committed to net zero by 2050, and that is our 8-point pledge. That's an important part of it. So basically, our policy is, rather than virtue signaling, we will be delivering these meaningful policy in the climate change space.
Could you just give me a little more detail on the farming emissions and your policy around reducing those?
I have to look on that one, but I can follow that one. But we will work with the farmers to reduce the farming or agri emissions in that space. But like I said, rather than virtue signaling and making them a villain, we will work along with them so we can have a meaningful achievement in the space.
Thank you. Tangi.
Virtue signalling. Well, virtual signalling, if it looks like having EVs rolled out throughout the country because we have a clean car rebate, then I'm all for that in terms of it being virtue signalling. What that actually has provided is access for people to take up the opportunity to have EVs. These 10,000 EVs that National say they're going to roll out all around the country come at one cost of scrapping that very support to enable households to enter the system. We have been focused also on renewable energy, and so transitioning to 100% renewable energy to assist with the the emissions profile is really, really important. Picking up on the work that Teanau has alluded to around homes, making sure that they're warm, healthy homes, that they're well insulated, supporting households with costs in that particular space. But fundamentally, ensuring that there is still dedicated resource and money in the SURF, the Climate Emergency Response Fund, not raiding it, the $2 million, to pay for tax cuts, which will not only not benefit households, but actually be at the detriment or to the detriment of our environment. So I know that, there's a question about environment, but we have a very clear message from a party that has said that they will provide tax cuts, and that's still questionable, at the expense of a $2.1 billion hole that we've heard about today, in addition to the raiding of $2 billion of a climate response fund is perhaps not virtue signalling, but I wouldn't say it's a good move.
Thank you. Actually, Ankit, I'll get you on the next one. I have to say I was slightly surprised, as much as I'm all for EV chargers, I was surprised that National put that up as something that government would provide, because I thought private enterprise was doing quite a good job of it. So I was a little surprised that...
That's quite slow. That's what we will need more on that.
But I'm all for more chargers. Right, we're moving on. So what does your political party intend to do to ensure accessibility and affordability to healthcare in our community?
Oh, yeah. Accessible, affordable healthcare is a major topic, and that's why I brought Dr. Shane Ratey here on 20th of July to talk about some of the challenges, right? Because we all know Palmerston North Hospital is in the news, right? So we will work with a local, rather than having, like I said, right, or everything with Tīwhā Tuiora. With the PHOs, we see an important role of PHOs, primary health organization, like the local GPs in that space, and we will be continue to working with them. Because that's why we have less and less people turning up to the ED, because the ED wait times are worse than Palmerston North Hospital across the country. So we will be working with those organizations and some of the other organizations which might be working in that space, like better health, better education and awareness space, like Tīwhā Tuiora. We will continue working with these space, and some like TTE and those organizations, like I mentioned, right? So we'll keep working. So there's education awareness, but enabling the PHOs to provide better healthcare services. That is our fundamental approach in that front as well. Obviously, having more staff, because we said we will support the third medical school, so we have more staff available in the country as well, and also retaining more staff, because that is more important as well, because at the moment we are bleeding staff to Australia and other countries, right? And building infrastructure is an important issue, but if you don't have staff to man those infrastructure, that's not a equally good solution either. So that's why we will work in the staffing solution as well.
So how would you retain staff? What's the policies there?
In terms of, we'll start with the nursing and midwifery. So we'll if they bond themselves if they stay in the country for 5 years, we will pay up to $22,500 of their student loan after 5 years. So it'll be $4,500 every year for the amount they keep in the country. Because that's more important. Like once they graduate, once they go out of the college, right, and they spend 5 years in the country, those are the most important times. And then the chances of them staying permanently in the country, like in their golden time, like say 23 to 28, 25 to 30, if they stay in the country, then them living in the country is a pretty long chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Tangi.
So one of the best things I think that this government has done has transitioned to a new health service in Te Whatu Ora and Te Akawhai Ora, and so we're firmly of the view that was the right thing to do, and that is still the case. And so what that means for our local community is it shouldn't matter where you live, you should be able to gain the access that you need to the services that you need to get. It's very clear that here in Palmerston North, we have pressures. I'm not going to hide that. It's very clear for everyone to see. So it is about ensuring that the staff that we have here are able to be retained, and I'm proud of the fact that we have delivered significant pay increases for nurses, for others in our community. A nurse that started out a few years back is now, some of them actually not started out, transitioning to a minimum of $100,000 in a salary. You couldn't pay me to do that job, but the reality is that we have made some huge improvements there. etc. Here at the hospital, we've made some improvements in terms of an extension area to the emergency department, the EDOA, the observation area, MAPU in terms of the planning unit where people can be direct referred to the hospital through their provider as well. But it is also around ensuring that we do have the capacity but the capability. And so we've announced just this week of our intention to increase the number of GPs or number of doctors actually that will be trained to meet that particular need. I think there is a real focus on ensuring that general practice is an attractable way to ensure that people that do their training see it as a viable vocational option instead of some of the others. And so while it's difficult in rural communities, it's still difficult in places like Palmerston North to attract people. So doing a bit more work in that space is important.
Could you repeat the question? I thought it was about accessibility and supporting disabled communities.
Here we go. What does your political party intend to do to ensure accessibility and affordability to healthcare in our community?
Accessibility and affordability. Well, with the accessibility part here, I've got a manifesto on the Greens as well, and there are different parts of that manifesto that speaks to our different of our portfolio platform, but that's what we're taking to the election. And so in terms of accessibility, what we would commit to is co-design accessibility legislation with the disabled community, underpinned by enforceable accessibility standards and cultural requirements to prevent and remove accessibility barriers. We'd reform the building code so new houses and buildings are accessible by design, unless specifically exempted, build more accessible social housing in all communities, and fund multi-led initiatives to provide accessible housing within Papakāinga. And I did talk about it earlier in terms of the income guarantee, which we would fund through a wealth tax. Because we need a fairer tax system. We would introduce a minimum income guarantee where all people limited in their capacity to work due to a disability or health condition receive at least 80% of the full-time minimum wage. So those are some of the things that we would be taking, that we are taking on the campaign trail in this election, and would involve any kind of discussions that we might have at the end of this campaign in terms of forming a government.
Thanks, Teanau. Tangi, the next one is for you, and this might be a little bit too easy for you, but it gives the others a little bit of time to think about it. The current government has made significant investment in working to address family and sexual harm. Tell us about your party's position and how you intend to take that work forward.
Yeah, so we hear a lot of criticism about these law and order stats that have been increased and that the police have been very busy. Well, if we step back and have a look at that, the reason largely is because a number of the charges that have been laid, because there are two specific new offences that relate to family harm and family violence. So one is family violence within the household, the other is effectively impeding the flow, which is strangulation offences. Prior to our government coming into effect, there was no opportunity for those who were the victims of that sort of offending within households, whatever the household looked like, to effectively have a pathway through to have that offending addressed. And so that's just one example of steps that we have taken. We obviously support the Greens, who have a particular area of responsibility around the reduction of family harm and sexual violence as well. But that, I think, it's very easy to look at these stats and try and turn them into a negative frame, whereas the reality is, what is not often reported is actually, when you look at the detail, it's because of changes that have empowered largely women who live in these households and in these environments to be able to actually get some support, and also to ensure that perpetrators of criminal offending like that are suffering the consequences as well.
Thanks, Tangi.
Kia ora. Just to add on to that, I wanted to acknowledge the work of our co-leader, Marama Davidson, as the Minister for the Prevention of Domestic and Sexual Violence, and the work that she's been doing to try to support our homeless whānau as well. And as I understand that work, it's about finding a way for all those then government departments to talk to each other, because for a very, very long time they didn't actually have a plan. They'd be doing their different bits and pieces over here, over there, this kind of thing as well, which is not really good in terms of how you try to have a full government approach. So the approach is trying to get that to work as well, but also acknowledging that there's a whole lot of people on the ground doing stuff as well, and trying to find the best way to support those organisations that are already at the already at the front line supporting whānau within the communities as well. And so that's, it's a continuation of making sure that we can support that work and to accelerate funding and resourcing and the ways for better coordination between all those different groups.
Thank you.
Thank you. As you mentioned, this is a question more for the government because more importantly, I'm not an MP yet, so I can't go too much in the detail. But there's two relative things I can say in this space, which first of all, our party has committed to creating a $20 million fund for the victims, and that to support the victims, whether they need to be on the. So that's the $20 million solely for the victims. And an important piece of policy legislation we have announced is that there will be because quite often, despite the gravity of the offence, the offender gets away quite a lot with the sentencing, right? So judges will have the restriction that they can only apply maximum 40% of the during the sentencing. So those are two important pieces we say. So the victims can be centered at the justice system and they can get the justice they deserve. Thank you.
And do you know if it's your party's policy to carry on the work that's already been done for the strategy around?
Sorry, I cannot comment on that
that's
one.
Fine, thank you. We'll be looking that one up, I'm sure.
Sure.
Who is next? Is it Teanau? Are you the next for the next one? In your view, what is the role of Te Tiriti o Waitangi in our government and New Zealand society more broadly? And how do you see this being put into practice?
When I'm not busy being a kukarara like Tangi Utikere here, I'm being a Ngāpuhi because my mum's from up north, and so the Treaty of Waitangi was signed in Ngāpuhi territory, and so for us within the Greens, it actually forms part of our charter. It's about the recognition that Māori are tangata whenua, and that Te Tiriti o Waitangi is the foundational document within Aotearoa New Zealand as well. We aren't scared of co-governance like other people, just like we're not scared of bilingual road signs like other political parties are as well. I think it's just really about recognising that this is the history of this place and this is the foundation of this place, and the importance of actually learning the history of the whenua beneath our feet. It's so important. It's good for our tamariki, it's good for everybody, and people should not be afraid of that. Ensuring that we have Māori voices at the table, and we supported the Māori wards legislation as well to ensure that we have those voices. It's just so important. It's actually a part of who we are to make sure that we can have those tangata whenua voices at the table. So having a treaty lens over all of our legislation is really, really important, and it's important to get that right. And what I would say also about Te Tiriti o Waitangi is that it's about ongoing relationships. It's about relationships. It's not about a set of discrete property rights where you just kind of settle things and move on. No, it's about making sure that you get that relationship right, and it is a good thing. When Māori succeed, that is good for everybody that lives here within Aotearoa, and having that collective way of doing things. And just a reminder, when we were in with the pandemic and also with the flood, so on and so forth, Marae opened their doors Marae opened their doors to support communities, because that is the tika way to do. And if we empower to have Te Tiriti o Waitangi to do that, we will be here all together in a good way here in Aotearoa.
Thank you.
Thank you. On Te Tiriti o Waitangi, would say on our website, this is the foundation principle, and we committed to it. And even personally, locally here, I'm meeting Evie next week, so we can work on a collaborative approach and as well. That's because obviously I like these two. I need to learn, but I'm making space there, and I'm meeting Evie with the local Evie next week to learn and committed to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Look, I tautoko everything that Teanau has said. I mean, if we look at our local community, our strength, our links, our partnership of a relationship with Rangitane is so strong. We've actually been in that position before we made the decision to legislate for Māori wards. I think it's something really special about this community, which actually opens up to be something special for Te Tiriti for Aotearoa New Zealand, which is part of the reason why we now will have New Zealand history being taught in New Zealand schools. I mean, I'm a history teacher by training, and and a good one, thank you. Yeah, your daughter tells you that, and actually, well, Chloe will tell you that too. Yeah, let's do a head count. Who's no? But it's it's always been the case that it's been an option, and often it's just because we'd always taught Tudor Stuart's English history that it never was something that was an easy thing to do. And so I'm proud of the fact that actually we've empowered school communities to make that change, and just ensuring that the special relationship and the special role that Māori have and has here in Aotearoa New Zealand is so special. It's so unique. We go to other parts of the world, and this is something that is uniquely New Zealand. And so having Te Tiriti and its principles informing legislation, being part of legislation, empowering communities to get on and do things in partnership with Māori, I think actually is something that we should celebrate. So it's a good thing.
Thank you. Look, everyone, there's just 2 more questions, and then we're going to have a general question to let the candidates sum up. So thank you, guys. We've been able to get through quite a bit, not only having the 3 and not... initially we thought we were going to have 5 candidates, so it might have been a bit slower. But we'll just do 2 more, and then we will finish... Whose turn is it to start? Ankit, your turn. I know you didn't get to the one at Massey, did you? Just because it's Palmerston North and we're all very intimately tied up with the tertiary sector here, how does your party intend to support the tertiary sector? I've got a little note here, Seven, given huge cuts, clawback of funding and changes to school leavers' expectations. Oh, that's quite loaded, isn't it?
Look, a lot of people might know that before being a candidate, I worked at Massey for 4 years, so some of the challenges I'm very well aware of. And important, like Palmerston North being a tertiary education city, we need to work closely not only with the universities but some of the other parts as well. And once again, I go back to my original argument: is rather than the centralization, we need to have regional and local focus on this one. So that's why we said we will bring the regional focus to the local focus to UCOL as well once we get in the government, because that's what we believe. And on terms of supporting the tertiary education sector, Penny Simmons and Erica Stanford, they are doing an amazing job. Erica Stanford, she was here for 2 days to listen to the principals as well. So in terms of education, we will sit down with them and whether the education, but we need our next generation to be skilled. So that's why we'll continue backing some of the tertiary education. So we don't have to cut on the courses, but some of the skilled and teachers we can retain, and we can train our ingrown workforce for the future as well.
Were you in the union?
No, I was in the professional services. Thank you.
Thanks, Ankit. Tangi.
Sorry, I just wanted
No. I was in the professional services. Not a union man.
I was in the union and I still am. So Teanau and I have just come from the union meeting up at Massey. Yeah, I was quick. But look, in this year's budget, we delivered a 5% increase to universities, which is the largest increase, an additional 5% than over 20 years. And we've also made it clear that over the next 2 years, we'll commit an extra $128 million to support universities. Universities, in my view, need to continue to be independent because they are the critic and conscience of communities, and so we need to be very careful around that. But I do think there is an expectation on university councils and on management that they engage and make sure the partnership and relationships with their staff is really top-notch, because there's a lot of goodwill that goes into universities. Actually, a lot of goodwill for those that come from education. You know that a lot of goodwill goes into education, full stop. So it is about that, but it's also about reviewing the funding model for universities in New Zealand, and we've announced that we would intend to do that. Well, not we would do it if we're re-elected. Just on Te Pukenga, the reality with Te Pukenga, which is UCOL here, is that the Crown was pumping in millions of dollars year after year to effectively meet a gap and a shortfall. And so the whole revitalisation and the whole reform within that vocational aspect of our education system in Te Pukenga is still working through a process. I still think it's still quite early to form some views on that. But the move of pulling all of that together and focusing on where communities are best placed to deliver vocational services within that structure is something that I think is really important, something we need to keep.
We both the Greens and the Labour Party signed the pledges up there. So for all the tertiary education union people, we are on board with those pledges as well. But what I would say generally is that neoliberalism has failed. It is absolute failure the way that privatisation has crept in, and it's so important, I think, now to step away from that. And to recognise tertiary institutions for what they are. They're about the public good. All the things that Tangi was saying, and that they should be supported and resourced in that way as well. What I would also say as well is that in all of this, there needs to be a space for the voice of the workers. There needs to be a space for staff to make sure that they are involved in all the different negotiations and the back and forth with whatever funding model would come out, which would, in our view, needs to have an increase in resourcing right across the board. That's what it needs, an increase in funding as well. But in terms of, and also just to add on to that, and I've said it a few times today, and this one adds to the attrition level of students as well. If you can have a guaranteed minimum income, $385, so that students are not living in poverty, because that's what the People's Inquiry into the Wellbeing of Students told us, that 2/3 of students were living in poverty. And if you're living in poverty, you are less likely to go to university. You are less likely. And the funding model is based on Fs, right? So if you don't get people through the door, then you don't get your Fs. So making sure that that students can put food on the table, keep the lights on, and have a warm whare will help them to go to university. So making sure that we deal with the drivers of inequality as well. And I'm very mindful of how much of a role that students play here within Palmerston North.
Thank you. And just since I've got three politicians in front of me here, and on behalf of the sector, don't forget about training for counsellors, social workers and people within our sector. We sometimes feel a little bit like we're not the main event. We like to think we are. So, yeah, since I've got all three of you there, a little bit of advocacy there.
Noted.
Excellent. Anything else I should be saying? I think we're saying it anyway, aren't we? Look, the final question before you will then get an opportunity to do your own little final spiel. And yes, actually, would be you, Tangi. I think you might be the next one up for the first. Food insecurity has been radically highlighted as a result of living with a pandemic. What measures do you and your party see as essential for mitigating this?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of accessibility to food, we've made announcements around fresh fruit and vegetables, but we're a bit of a food bowl here up this part of the country and up further up the coast. Perhaps not as much as we used to from the start of the year, but it is about ensuring that we continue to work in partnership with others. You know, if we think about food security also being accessibility to food, and wonderful that we've opened our first social supermarket here in our community last month or thereabouts, to ensure that there is no judgment over those that need to access and utilise that. So it's not just about ensuring that what we have here we're able to continue to grow and provide, but the other side of that is making sure that families and households that do have issues around access to food is able to be assisted by the good work that community organisations do here in our community, but also by making sure that households are in a better financial position. And, you know, we can talk about again how best we think that is achieved in terms of putting money in people's households and pockets, but food security and insecurity is an important one to make sure that we can all continue to function.
Thanks, Tangi. Hello.
I find the supermarket duopoly incredibly problematic, that you have these two supermarket companies who actually completely dominate how we can access food as well. And I'm just mindful that during the pandemic and after the pandemic, they were raking in $1 million a day on top of the profit that they usually make. That's $1 million a day, because you couldn't go anywhere else, right? And the way that other countries have actually dealt with that was with what they call a windfall tax as well. So you didn't create the conditions to make this profit. So there should be a slice in there that should be for everybody. So that was the thing that we were calling for at that time as well, along with banks, because banks are making bank as well, and also mindful that in the middle of a climate crisis, the fossil fuel companies are just raking it in. So there is a place to pay to make sure that money gets shared out across the community. Because when that was happening, that money was not going into the pockets of supermarket workers. It wasn't. It wasn't going into the pockets of supermarket workers at all. And I remember talking to some of them, it's like, well, I was an essential worker, it was this, that, and the other, and I got like a 50-cent pay rise. I mean, come on. Really? You guys are raking in $1 million a day and you won't pass it down to your workers? So there's a place there, I think, for government to play to make sure that the corporations actually pay their fair share of tax so that everybody can live in a fair Aotearoa, put food on the table, keep the lights on and have a warm whare.
Thank you.
Perhaps government could have allowed independent food operators to open during that time as well, so they could be a bit of sharing the love as well during the pandemic. But anyway, yeah, I know. Anyway, moving on. In terms of having a better food accessibility, I think the most important thing, and even when I was doing volunteering shift at the food rescue store just last week, one thing I particularly noticed, like there were so many people who were even working full time, but they're still turning up to the food rescue stores just because food is the only item they could cut on. Either their rent has gone up or their mortgage have gone up, and all these expenses are eating up a lot of their disposable income, right? In terms of having those accessibility, the root cause, what we're saying, the cost of living crisis, and that's what we focus our efforts on to start with, providing them the relief they need, right? Whether it's in terms of providing the extra childcare subsidies, providing them the tax relief much needed they need. And then they can decide where they want to spend their own money rather than government dictating where you should be, right? And whether it's controlling the inflation, controlling the rising interest rates, that the focus will be so people can have food their own table. And thank you.
Thank you. Tian, I think you get to start. So this really is a general... actually going to give you, we could give you 3 minutes. We're going to be very for anything final summary, bearing in mind we're a community focused organisation, so any summary you would like to offer us. Thank you.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for all showing up today as well. Ngā mihi kia koutou also to everybody that's providing the sound and ringing the bells, so important. Especially for me, I've been dinged up all these two. But what I would say, the time is now for people and planet. It's time to put people before profit. The time is now for community and the climate. We are in the middle of a climate crisis. We're in the middle of a biodiversity crisis. And over all of that is the crisis of inequality. And so the time is now actually to sort it out. And I think the time has passed for us to actually tinker around the edges. We've actually got to take bold change. The time is now for a bold change. And so that's why the Greens have been unashamedly calling for a wealth tax, so that we have a fairer tax system and to make sure that the incredibly rich pay their fair share so we can fund all the things that we've been talking about today. It's all very good and well to talk about how you're going to cut this and cut that, and then all of a sudden all these massive holes show up. That's not going to cut the mustard. What we need to be doing is to make sure that putea is coming in so we can all live in a good way here in Aotearoa, all live in a good way here in Palmerston North, and that is so important. That's why I'm asking you guys to vote Green, to party vote Green this election, because there is a very stark choice in this election that I don't think has presented itself in other elections as well. You've got a choice between the right, national, being directed by the ACT Party, who have not even bothered to show up today, or a Labour-led government with a green heart at the centre of it. And I'm sure Tangi can tolerate me enough around the government benches for that to be a good thing. You will have us pushing for all of these things to make sure that we address the drivers of inequality and the drivers of poverty here within our home here in Palmerston North, but right across the motu in Aotearoa as well. And I beat the bell. Kia ora.
Well done. Ankit, what would you like to share as a final words?
Yeah, thank you. Like I say, this is 4 important issues that we will be focusing. I'll be focusing on locally, and the most important among all of these is like cost of living. Then we do have infrastructure and resilient infrastructure, because some of the cyclones, all these natural events have presented that whether we like it or not, we need to have make investments in the resilient and future-proof infrastructure, whether it's road, transportation, housing, or whether it's the infrastructure like around the UFB, because when Cyclone Gabriel hit, Hawke's Bay was cut off the country, right? So we need to have a future-proof. So we will be investing in that space. Another important, since like I say, from the community, a lot of people in the community, for a vibrant and thriving city, we need to have a safe and protecting environment, and that's why we will be focusing on the law and order issues around as well. Then for the next generation, we need to have an better education system, whether it's a primary or whether it's a tertiary education. We need to have the competent people in that space as well. And most importantly, and even locally, and that's my commitment to the community as well, and that I will be working, if I get lucky enough, I'll be working with the next health minister to have a better infrastructure, and we work with the local PHOs as well. But at the same, further down the line, to have a new Palmerston North hospital as well. And Dr. Shane Ritty, when he was here in 20th July, he has actually announced that it is on his radar, and we will be working on that one once we get in the government. Thank you. That's my focus.
Thank you. Thanks. Tangi.
Kia ora ana tātou. Thank you, Kim. Thank you everyone for your time, and to my two colleagues here as well. Look, I've enjoyed the last 3 years. I'd love to continue as the local MP. For me, many in this room will know that I've always stood on my track record whenever I've come up to an election. And so for me, this election is no different. So I'm very happy to stand on the track record of what I have delivered for our local community. And just know that we've had, at last count, over 2,000 constituents who have engaged with the elected office over the issues here, which is a fundamental role of any local MP. And a local electorate MP is to support the needs of their local community. I'm really proud of the work that we've done in that space. But Teanau is right. This election, there is a very stark choice, and that's why I don't mind working with you. There is a very stark choice, and that is either you will have a government that is going to focus on addressing some of those cost of living pressures in one way, which is going to be at the behest of the ACT Party and potentially the New Zealand First Party. And just to be very clear, we've made it quite clear that we are not intending to work with Winston Peters or the New Zealand First Party, because our values are completely different, and the rhetoric that's coming out of his mouth at the moment does not align with the values of the New Zealand Labour Party. But is it about tax cuts that are not funded? And today is yet another example of that, and is not going to be targeted at the right place. Or is it going to be by way of addressing the issue of cost of living by ensuring that the co-payment, the $5 charge for most scripts, actually, for the huge majority of scripts in this country, no longer exist? Proud of that. We've said that we will continue to have that as the approach in place. Is it about ensuring that those who are 2-year-olds are able to access early childhood education that alleviates a lot of the pressures on households? Is it about ensuring that public transport continues to be free for young folk, or half price for those that need a little bit of extra support? Is it about ensuring that fresh fruit and vegetables no longer have GST, so that assists in the cumulative support that is going to target households? You know, these are the real choices that we all have leading into the 14th of October. If you think that it is about those ones that I've just mentioned, then I encourage you to party vote Labour. We can work with the Greens, we've made that very, very clear, but party vote Labour is the only way in which we're going to ensure that we have a government that is focused on supporting the needs of households that are doing it tough right now, and that includes right here in Palmerston. Thank you again for your time.
Look, thanks. I'm just going to got a couple more things. First is I want to thank you, audience. I know some of you were sitting on your hands and biting your tongue, so well done, audience. Very restrained, and thank you for the feedback you did give. To Mike Harnett from ACT, your absence is noted. He did say he was coming. We didn't get an apology. So, and I think, Teanau, you made the point, they're a very important part of the selection, and they haven't shown up, and that, to be honest, is incredibly disappointing. Ankit, thank you for coming, because you are up, some very well experienced politicians here, and thank you for turning up bravely, which your colleague didn't. But it's very encouraging to see people who are interested in politics and standing up and actually coming and talking to us and hearing from us. And I was encouraged to hear that you're a volunteer, I assume, just Zilch. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming. Tiano, I wanted to jump on my high horse and ride off with you in some of those inspiring speeches. Thank you. And Tangi, thank you for coming along. And as you have, many of us who work in the sector do take or send clients to Tangi's office, and we know that they get very well treated. Not to mention, sometimes we send our clients, get them to email Minister Sefel. Is she still the Minister of Social? Social Development, because sometimes nothing else helps. So just really want to acknowledge that on behalf of the sector.